Well, we get some pretty good injury news today. Good for you if you have Brian Robinson. I freaking have Sam Laporta and Najee, so kind of sucks for me, but we'll dive through it all. So let's just start with the most recent stuff, and then we'll go backwards. DK Metcalf officially practiced Wednesday in full. Metcalf's going to be 100% good to go. Like, if you have Metcalf, you play him. It's a tough matchup, but you shouldn't be worried about the injury whatsoever going into the future. Hayden Hurst, don't care. Josh Reynolds, don't care. Isaiah Likely limited in practice on Wednesday. Obviously, you don't care about Likely himself, but this will have an impact specifically on how you are going to be viewing Mark Andrews. Jamal Williams doesn't practice on Wednesday. Don't care. Higgins goes through walkthrough, but he doesn't take actual practice reps. So I don't really know how relevant this is. Definitely more encouraging than the reports that we had last week, of course, and the week before where Higgins just wasn't at practice at all. So it is nice that you at least get a limited report, a limited status. Tank Bigsby doesn't practice on Wednesday. If Bigsby were to miss, then maybe at that point, you could potentially go through and look at Travis Etienne as an option. But I don't know if we really would want to. Kittle is expected to return to practice. Kittle's going to be fine. He's tied in one rest of season. Najee doesn't practice Wednesday. This freaking sucks. If you have Najee, there's a very real possibility that Najee Harris does end up missing this game. Obviously, the practice reports on Thursday and Friday are going to be massive here. If Najee were to miss, then at that point, Jalen Warren is a very exciting start. George Kittle is going to be good to go. Don't worry about Kittle. Brian Robinson Jr. not even listed on the injury report. So we have seen Brian Robinson practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice over the past month. And it doesn't matter how many practices he gets in. It seems that he is just simply never playing. Well, now he is going to be playing in the Thursday game. Is the matchup great? Probably not. Do you play him? Probably yes. Michael Pittman Jr. listed as a full practice participant on Wednesday. So a little bit surprising that he's practicing in full early in the week here. So it seems like Pittman's going to be good to go. Obviously, Anthony Richardson is back in. So we are going to move down the rankings considerably. Aaron Rodgers said he still thinks he wants to play in 2025. Rodgers lies constantly. If y'all remember last year, Rodgers told us every single week, oh yeah, the Achilles is feeling good. I may be back this season. I'm going to be back. I could be back this season. I don't listen to anything that Rodgers says and take it serious. DK Metcalf is good to go. DK Metcalf practice in full. McCarthy underwent second surgery to address swelling. No changes to recovery timetable. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I read the first part of this and I go, dear God, that sounds very serious. I read the second part of it and go, okay, sounds like it's good to go in 2025. Now, Sam Laporta doesn't practice Wednesday. This freaking sucks, not only for my team in the Flock League, but also all my Underdog Best Ball drafts as well. I recently, in the Flock League, picked up Pat Frymuth just in case Laporta's not good to go. He is day-to-day, though. The practice reports Thursday, Friday are going to be massive here with Laporta. Gardner Minshew going to start for the Raiders Week 11. Frankly, it doesn't matter. I mean, whoever it is going to be garbage. Marshawn Lloyd designated to return from IR. This is actually a little interesting here. I did not see this. Obviously, I'm not telling you to rush out there and go pick up Marshawn Lloyd by any stretch of the imagination, but if you think Lloyd could come in and potentially have a small role, this could slightly impact expectations with Josh Jacobs' rest of season. Good chance Juju plays this week. Don't play Juju. I don't even know if I'd roster him, to be honest. Pacheco not going to play week 11. I honestly would be surprised if we saw Pacheco week 11. I'd be surprised if we saw him week 12. I think Pacheco's probably back week 13. Amari limited in practice on Wednesday. Please freaking play Amari. I'd be surprised if Kincaid's going to play this week because with Dalton Kincaid, you have the bye week in week 12. So I think expectation is Kincaid misses this week and then you have him back after the bye. Now, Anthony Richardson is going to start for the Colts rest of season. So I am sorry to everybody that I told Josh Downs was an interesting buy low candidate. the reports that we had previous to today was that Joe Flacco was the starting quarterback, not just in the short term, but they told us Joe Flacco was going to be the starter rest of season. So now that you see this with A-Rich, it's a complete 180. If you're playing in a deep format, then you could potentially go ahead and look at Anthony Richardson as a potential viable QB streamer. More likely than not, are you actually excited to do that, though? More likely than not, you're actually just lowering down Josh Downs, lowering down Michael Pittman Jr., if you had any hope, and lowering Taylor down a small amount in your rankings as well. This pretty much just hurts everybody in Indy. Now, going over to the other news that we have, I think that's about it. Lawrence ruled out. You're expecting Lawrence to miss. Devontae Adams missed practice on Wednesday. This could be slightly concerning as he has the bye in week 12. The Jets obviously aren't playing for anything at this point. So you could very easily see the situation where Adams just sits out week 11, gets to be 100% going into week 13. Miles Sanders avoided major injury. Doesn't matter. Jonathan Brooks after the bye, taking the Sanders role. And then I think that should be it. Brian Robinson Jr., like we said, completely off the injury report, should be 100% good to go. But let's move this over and let's get ready to answer the questions that we have on the site. Couple different things. One, I don't know if y'all saw on the site, but we actually did just push out an update where if you go over and you hit your little if you go to your account, you can update your profile pic where you can just go ahead, click a little avatar. You can choose whatever bird you want, choose whatever background you want. For me, I like the goose. I like the orange background, hook 'em horns, but definitely get a little personal touch in there. Make sure you set up your little bird. And also, of course, if you ever wanted to ask any questions over on flockfantasy.com, this is where we always get the questions from the live streams. You can literally ask them whenever you want. You don't need to wait until we're live streaming. You don't even need to be in the live stream to see your answer, because as soon as it's answered, it's actually going to be sent to you through the site with a custom link that will take you to the exact second that we answered your fantasy football question on the site. So you can literally send in a question whenever you want, even if you're not in the stream. Doesn't matter. Just go hit the personalized advice button on the site. You can find in the top right corner. You hit personalized advice. Then you can go through and send in a super message, starts a question, trade question, team review, whatever you are wanting. Of course, I do want to reiterate that also, if you wanted to get a full-blown team review, what I would recommend is actually taking advantage of the offer that we have over there on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you'll get a free Jalen Hurts pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game on Thursday night. And you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every night. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way, the next day when they send me the list of email addresses that signed up to Underdog with code FLOCK, we can go ahead and we can accredit all those accounts with free team review vouchers. But our first team that we got to look at is Sriracha Matt. I'm very excited to look at this for you, my guy. I'm very sorry that we were not able to get to this last night. Excited to check it out. 4-6, full PPR, 3 wide receiver, 2 flex. So it's a league where wide receiver depth actually does matter. It's a 10-team league, though, so there should be decent options on waivers. But I traded Josh Downs and Alexander Mattison for Waddle the week before Tua came back. Wild roller coaster with this, where honestly, if you would have done this like the week before Tua would have came back, I would have said, oh, great deal. Waddle's going to be a lot better with Tua back in. Now, obviously, Waddle's been a freaking bomb. And Downs had been super interesting. But now that you have the bum Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis, it's like, oh, okay, well, neither wide receiver is viable. So, frankly, doesn't matter that much. Should we trade Devontae, and what should we look to trade for? So Devontae Adams himself is a wide receiver that I would say in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, like 10-team league, where the wide receiver depth isn't super exciting, then yeah, I would probably go ahead and look to sell Adams if you could get some great price tag. However, specifically in your format where you can start up to 5 wide receivers weekly, for you, I would actually say that Davante Adams is like the perfect guy for this format. And if you were selling him, I think you are selling at a low point. Obviously, the Jets offense looks absolutely horrendous. Everybody in your league knows this. Everybody in your league probably thinks this. You are averaging about 10 targets a game for Davante Adams over the past month. The only hesitation I would have with telling you that you can't trade him away is one, again, I don't think you should because of the league format, but the only reason I think you could make an argument for it despite the league format is if you're 4-6, you're not yet in the win or go home range, but it's pretty damn close. Like you can't fall to 4-8. I mean, you can't fall to 8 losses. 8 losses, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for you to make a difference. And we know Adams has the week 12 bye, so at minimum, he's missing week 12. If it looks like Adams is going to miss week 11 as well, then at that point, just pivoting over and getting to a wide receiver that's already through his bye, even if the points per game will be a little bit less rest of season, that could potentially be interesting. But anyway, we are currently 7th in the league analyzer. There's a juggernaut team at the very top with Barkley, CMC, Kamara, Neighbors, McLaurin, Kelsey, Jalen Hurts. That team's going to be very difficult to take down. But we are currently sitting here with Lamar. And obviously, never not excited to have Lamar. Lamar is just an absolute monster. I will say, if you are looking at what you have with Lamar Jackson in this league format, the elite quarterback is going to matter a little bit less when you can start up to 5 wide receivers weekly, just because wide receiver depth is going to make up a higher percentage of your starting lineup output from a week-to-week perspective. Now, obviously, still love having Lamar Jackson. No hesitation with that. Going over to running back, we have 2 running backs that we're very excited to play weekly. You're sitting here with the combo of Breece and David Montgomery. Can very easily say nice RB1, RB2 combo, even if Breece and this Jets offense has been disappointing. The depth here is kind of whatever, right? Where we have Eckler, Spears as guys that we could play if need be, but definitely not excited for it. But more so, they are premium handcuff backs where if you were to see an injury to a starter in front of them, then at that point, they do probably become must-start options, and they should see the vast majority of their own backfields. Now, with that being said again, the running back depth isn't great here. Going over to wide receiver depth really matters in this format. And here you have Puka, Adams, Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell, Jawan Jennings, Cedric Tillman. We have Ricky Pearsall and Wan'Dale Robinson as well. Wide receiver depth matters here. There are no wide receivers off the waiver wire that I think would be interesting pickups and pivots off the guys that you already have with this team. Now, with that being said, you could potentially look to make an argument that there are some interesting running backs off the waiver wire. And a pivot that I would actually make, regardless of if you had Breece Hall or not, is I think I would probably drop Tank Bigsby in favor of Braylon Allen. Knowing, 1, Bigsby's currently banged up. 2, even if you had no ETN, Bigsby's still not going to catch the ball. And the offense is probably too bad for a running back who's not going to catch the ball to ever be viable. And if you're looking at Braylon Allen, I think with the Breece injury, he will have the receiving role. He does have the size to be a 3-down player. So I do think that he would be somebody that you could start. So I'd drop Bigsby and I'd pick up Braylon. And to be honest with you, I don't think you can afford to trade Davante Adams with this. Again, this is a league where the wide receiver depth definitely matters more. We're built around that wide receiver depth, which I do like to see. The only scenario in which I think you're looking to make a trade here, and that specifically is with Devontae Adams, of course, is if Adams looks to miss this next week with the wrist injury, and then you have to deal with the bye week in week 12 as well, and you are sitting here at 4-6, then at that point, I think it's a very comfortable spot to then go ahead and see if you can pivot off of Adams in a 2-for-1 deal. But again, I do want to reiterate that if you are selling Adams, nobody in your league is going to be excited. Or at least from what I have seen in these live streams, what I have seen in the comment section, obviously nobody wants any piece of this New York Jets offense at this point. So just understand, if you're selling Adams, you're selling at a low point. I think that this is a receiver that can make a difference in your league settings in particular, especially with this roster. I'm fine selling at the low point if it looks like we're not going to get usable weeks from him over the next few, and when we're closing in on every game being a must-win game for us. But I think it's very hard to make any moves with this team. One thing that I think you could possibly consider, that I hate saying, is if you could sell Lamar for like a mid QB1 and a top end receiver. Like if you could sell, and obviously I'm not saying that you can do this. It's just woulda, coulda, shoulda. But if you could in this league where you can start 5 wide receivers weekly, sell like Lamar and get back Burrow and Kupp, then 100% we are wanting to make that move. But again, much easier said than done. I understand more likely than not, you're not going to be able to pull it off. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock. I do really appreciate you, of course. Now let's move this over to our next question. This is a start sit coming out from Archer. Here at wide receiver, we are choosing between Lamb, Mooney, JSN, Hopkins. Hopkins, Mooney, and JSN all really have tough matchups. Lamb did have the 10 targets last week, so we will go Lamb. It's a little too early to know in terms of the tight ends that we're looking at with Kincaid and Andrews. We are waiting for updated news with Kincaid on if he's playing or not, and also updated news with Likely on if Likely's playing or not. Because if you have no Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews does look like somebody that you can be very excited about. So I think for now, it's more likely than not you're going to be going Andrews. Down in the flex, you have no James Conner, so we're pretty much right back to the receivers. I will go with DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, it should be a game where the Chiefs are kind of forced to throw the ball. They're actually dogs in this game, which is a little surprising. Going over to our next question from JB. My guy, I really appreciate you. Let me hook you up with a free start sit question. That way, next time you send something in, it's on the house. Says, non-PPR, looking ahead to Burrow's bye, who do you prefer, Stafford or Herbert in week 12? Most weeks, Stafford's not interesting. Stafford actually has fewer games with 15 or more points this season than he does with games with fewer than 15. Let me just pull up the schedules. Obviously, we have every week 11 matchup memorized. I don't have the week 12 ones, though. Week 12, the Rams will be going up against the Eagles, who have a 10-day break leading into that. Don't love that setup. The Chargers should be going up against the Ravens. So I actually may prefer Justin Herbert over Matthew Stafford in week 12. I think rest of season, I'd rather have Stafford most weeks, though. It's just a tougher matchup. And then looking at what we're doing with this team this week, we're choosing between Hopkins and Dobbins. If you're looking at the Chargers, they are actually favored here over the Bengals by about 1.5. So it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world if you see the Chargers able to effectively run the ball in the second half here. Since this is a non-PPR format, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Dobbins. But if it was a full PPR league, I think you could make a strong argument for Hopkins instead. But let's move over to our next question from Ghost. Appreciate you. Says, tough week. Should we go Bo over Stroud? I did rank Bo Nix over CJ Stroud in the rankings this week. And then Ricky over Jameson. Let me pull up my wide receiver ranks. I think we have these guys extremely close. Obviously, Jameson, you're just banking on the long receiving touchdown. Yeah, that's what you got with Ricky this past week. You do have the Lions projected out to be the highest scoring offense in the NFL with an implied team total about 30 points. I have Jameson at wide receiver 37 and Ricky at wide receiver 40, so it's close. But I do have Jameson over Ricky. And then you were saying we also have Gabe Davis and MVS on the waiver wire. Definitely not considering either. Love you, brother. Thanks. Love you, my guy. Thank you so much for always hanging out with us in these streams, of course. Going down to the flex, we have no Tracy. Dowdle versus Pearsall is close. I'd probably go Dowdle, to be honest, even if we hate it. But yeah, awkward spot with the buys this week, of course. Nate coming out with our next question says, who to start at wide receiver after Amon-Ra? Also, who are we going to go with that quarterback? You definitely go Kyler over Cousins. Actually, I'm an idiot. Kyler's on bye. So I can't see who's on the waiver wire, but I would look to try to stream a different option than Cousins, because if you look at the Cousins matchup this week going up against Denver, typically we're used to seeing the Falcons project out with an implied total of like 25, 26 points, or else at least that's what we've had for quite some time here. But actually this week, you have the Falcons projected out instead with an implied team total of, I want to say 20.5. Like, it's like the lowest we have seen this team projected pretty much all season. Wide receiver DK Metcalf is a very easy play. And I am probably going to take Pickens over Lamb this week. I have Pickens ranked at 15, Lamb ranked at 16. Obviously, the Steelers should be a much better offense. And at the same time, you actually have a really strong matchup going up against the Ravens. So I'm going to go with Pickens. I don't know if we love it, though. Now, O Pickles coming out of their next question says, I'm still last tired of getting screwed. Well, first off, I'll say quarterback, if we've been starting Herbert every single week, we're in a tough spot. I'll say this week, pretty decent matchup. Running back, seems like Jones will play. The Vikings are heavy favorites here over the Titans. They should be able to run the ball consistently. Tight end between Taysom and Goddard, relatively close. Obviously, you do have an expanded role with Taysom. Non-PBR format, we probably go Taysom, bank in on the touchdown. And then going down to the flexes, I think it's easy to take the running backs that just have the guaranteed opportunities. If you were looking at making a pivot, I think you pivot to DeAndre Hopkins. And you would do so in the case that Pacheco's good to go. But expectations are Pacheco misses this week and you get another week of Hunt being viable. Now, Holy Hero coming out with our next question. It says Tony Pollard versus DK Metcalf. This is DK Metcalf, not too close either. Obviously, Seattle should be a much better offense here in the long term. If you're looking at Tony Pollard, we had been talking about it for a while, but Spears coming in was going to take usage as a receiver, and you were going to see the volume go down from Pollard. That's exactly what's happened here. So I think it's kind of an easy spot to just go ahead and pivot to the player that's in the better offense with Metcalf. Now, going over to the next question from Skitty. This is a trade question here where we're looking at Henry and Hopkins versus CMC and Evans. Give me CMC over Henry. You get the extra game played. Evans versus Hopkins. Give me Evans. You have no Godwin rest of season. Says also offered Kyron and Hawkinson for Breece and Kelsey. Ooh, that one's close. I'd probably rather have Breece and Kelsey. But I wouldn't fault you at all if you want to say, Mason, you're a clown. Come on, Derrick Henry, we've had the incredible sample from. He's been dominant all season. CMC, you've only seen for 1 week. I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to say Henry over CMC. But my thing is when you're also getting the upgrade at wide receiver to Mike Evans, there it would be a tougher spot for me to make the argument to not just lock in CMC and Evans. Now, let me refresh this real quick. We got to get some of y'all updating the profile picks. We can't be looking at the same bird over and over again. They're all the Blue Ducks. Nobody's updated their pick. We got a couple profile picks updated. But reminder, come on, ladies and gentlemen. Go over to the account page on flockfantasy.com. Hit your account page. You can update your little bird. As of now, you can see everybody's rolling with the default one. But if we can get some customization in here, that would be a little nice. Somebody go with the chicken. I haven't seen a chicken yet. But let's move this over. D-Money, I appreciate you, my guy. Excited to check this out. Let me go ahead and hook you up with a free start sit question and a free trade question, just in case there's anything else that you want to send our direction. Says, liking my team, where can I upgrade? Pushing for playoffs and beyond. Okay. Well, I will say real quick that I apologize, but with the site, we do not have Superflex redraft rankings. We only have Superflex Dynasty and one quarterback redraft. So when you're looking at the league analyzer is pulling in one quarterback rankings. So here in this Superflex league, it honestly is not going to be a great gauge of things. Just to be completely honest with you. Going through and pulling up our quarterback room, you're in a really good spot. Obviously, Burrow must start QB1 that we're excited about every single week. You can go through and you can look to play the matchups between CJ Stroud and Tua here relatively easily. I think we should be excited about that. Stroud's definitely going to be a lot better now that you are getting back in Nico Collins. It's a 5-5 team that had to deal with the CMC injury early, so obviously you're in a much better spot going into the future. CMC looks to be a locked and loaded RB1 rest of season here. Looking at what you have with Josh Jacobs, Jacobs is a very safe option to have as your RB2. Aaron Jones, I would be excited to have him as RB2, to have him as your RB3 here is great. Estime is expanding his role. Edwards does have a role as well. For me, I know we talked about Gus Edwards in the waiver wire video this week, but honestly, in your league, looking at the waiver wire options that you have at running back, I don't think I would hold on to Edwards here. I think Charbonnet would be more interesting. Where if you're looking at Charbonnet, with the range of outcomes, you're never really starting Edwards or Charbonnet outside of if you were to see that injury ahead of them. And I could very easily buy the argument that maybe Dobbins is a little more prone to see that injury than what you're going to have with Walker. But if Dobbins were to get injured, it's not like Gus Edwards turns into an absolute must-start running back no matter what. You will still be in a spot in which you don't have a ton of receiving usage for Edwards, where we have seen Charbonnet in a situation where you have absolutely every single touch in the backfield when Kenneth Walker goes down. So I would prefer Charbonnet over Gus Edwards at the very bottom end. Wide receiver, we have 3 wide receiver ones in the long term with Chase, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans. Waddles is a depth piece. Who cares? Going over to tight end, looks like Hawkinson's breaking out. Sam Laporta injured. I mean, if we knew Laporta was going to miss a considerable amount of time, I think I can make an argument to go ahead and look to drop Laporta and go ahead and instead pick up Tucker Kraft. And then in terms of us making any other moves with this team, really the only thing I think you could possibly say, and now that you have CMC fully healthy, if you wanted to, and by no means is it something that you have to do, you could possibly look to send Aaron Jones and a quarterback to go get a QB upgrade for that super flex spot. But my thought process with the roster is I think it's going to be a lot better anyway when you get Nico Collins back in. I think that is going to naturally elevate CJ Stroud and the passing volume that we expect in Houston. So I think, honestly, if you're selling CJ Stroud, who's been objectively bad in fantasy, has one game this season with 20 or more fantasy points, you are really selling at a low point before you get Nico back in. So again, if you were going to make a trade, I think that's really the only trade that stands out, is knowing that we have the running back depth where we can afford to send one of our viable RBs with CMC back in, go send Aaron Jones and CJ Stroud to get a stud quarterback for the flex. And obviously you can go out there and put some feelers into the water and see what comes back in our direction. But my concern would just be, I think that you are probably selling CJ Stroud very much at a low price if we are looking to do that. But I really do appreciate you, and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. Again, if there's anything else I can do, don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. And I did hook you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question as well. But thank you again. And I think it should be a much better team, obviously, now that we have CMC back in. And real quick, I need to check in on something. Okay. Okay, let's move this over to our next question. Soaring Eagle coming out with our next cue. Okay, my guy, you got to go ahead. You got to update the profile pic to the Eagle if this is the name we're rolling with. Not going to lie, I do like picking up A-Rich potentially if you are a psycho. With A-Rich, you still have the rushing upside. He could still be absolute garbage in fantasy and possibly, garbage in real life and possibly viable in fantasy just because he is going to run the ball a little bit more. But I would still probably go Goff over him. And Goff's supposed to be in the highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. Going over to tight end, David Njoku, TJ Hawkinson both look like must-start options. I probably go with Hawk. I do think that David Njoku potentially could be someone you flex depending on what our wide receiver room looks like. And F it, I honestly would go Njoku here in the flex spot. It sounds crazy, and 99.99% of the time, I don't want to flex a tight end. But realistically, like if you look at the projections that you have this week, at least on Underdog, David Njoku is higher or lower 53.5 receiving yards. Whereas if you look at, say, what you're getting with Romeo Doubs, who's probably the best receiver here, Doubs higher or lower at 3.5 receptions, less likely to score that touchdown as well. So this is like one of the very, very rare instances where I think you actually go ahead and you actually put the tight end into the flex. Now, Yeet Your Feet coming out with our next question. Says, hey, Mason, I can also trade Ingram instead of Kraft. There's just no reason to do this. I don't even care how many tight ends we have on this roster. I don't care what the league settings are. Actually, let me take that back. If it's a league where you don't have to start a tight end, then sure. If it's a league where your tight end spot's an extra flex, then go get Michael Pittman. But Pittman's the wide receiver 2 in what should be one of the lowest volume passing offenses in the entire NFL at this point. I am pretty easily taking Kraft here, to be honest. Now, Be Witness coming out with our next question. This is Brian Robinson, Justin Jefferson versus Kenneth Walker and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Give me Jefferson over St. Brown. Give me Walker over Brian Robinson. It's close, but I mean, I personally view Walker as a locked and loaded RB1 rest of season. So I would probably go with the Walker and Amon-Ra St. Brown side of this. Now, Sidekick coming out with our next question. Says, I need wins ASAP. Start sit in a non-PPR format. 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and a flex. Okay, so running back, CMC, automatic, locked and loaded starter. Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery may actually be an interesting conversation. In that if you are looking at Taylor, the check down rate should be lower with A-Rich than it would have been with Flacco. The offense should be much worse as well. But because Jahmyr Gibbs isn't in Indy, I probably still stand by Taylor over Montgomery. Wide receiver, you go A.J. Brown and Nico Collins. Flex, you're going to go with Cooper Kupp. And then tight ends, we're going to plan on Pitts. If likely misses and you wanted to pivot over to Andrews, you could do so if you wanted. Now, our next question coming over from Jack Imbarak says, need a quarterback. Would use Amari to fill in Tracy. Do you think we could rely on Amari? So St. Brown to A.J. Brown, slight upgrade / lateral move. Tracy, Kate Otten to Josh Allen. I think this is a very fair price point. And yes, let me see if we have any other depth beyond this. You have Kamara, Gibbs, Chase Brown at running back. Wide receiver, we have Tyreek, Amari, Addison, and then A.J. Brown. So yeah, you have plenty of depth. I think you can rely on Amari when he's actually playing. Of course, the issue is, I mean, the man's not healthy right now, at least. Now, he's been at practice forever. You're really hoping that he plays this week. But it's just not a guarantee, and then you have to deal with the bye week in week 12. But I think it's a very fair price point to go get Josh Allen. Now, our next question coming out from Jake. Here in the flex, we are looking at Dobbins, Brian Robinson as our viable RBs. Wide receiver, you have no Neighbors. You have no McBride at tight end this week. You can't start Brian Robinson here. I'm sorry. I think you start both running backs. I think you go Dobbins. I'm sorry, you can't start Brian Thomas. I apologize. I think you bench Brian Thomas. You don't put him at the flex with how bad this Jacksonville Jaguars offense is. And instead, I think I play both running backs with Dobbins and Brian Robinson. They should be in a better offense. You get the guaranteed volume. I think I'm just going to take the running backs with the guaranteed touches. Now, Jack and Barack out again. This is Gibbs, Tracy versus CMC. I'm going to go CMC. This is the same team as the other deal. I'd be fine with either one. Really, I do think it's a personal preference on which one you want to be looking at. I'm viewing Tracy as a locked and loaded RB2 rest of season. Obviously, we called Tracy a sell high candidate after the Pittsburgh game. People mocked us. It was a good call. Should have listened. And the issue with that is if you are looking at Tracy, it's a garbage offense where he probably doesn't have an extremely large role as a receiver. So typically, if you're in a bad offense, right, we need the receiving usage for you to be viable. And you're just sadly not getting that with Tracy at this point. And CMC doesn't have Montgomery in his own backfield taking volume. Now, Francis coming out with our next question says, hello, my guy. Thoughts on this trade we just made? Neighbors to Puka, lateral move up to you. Dowdle to Madison, downgrade with pickup downs. Doesn't really matter. I'm completely okay with I'm fine with it. If it wasn't for Anthony Richardson getting ruled as the starting quarterback in Indianapolis, I'd be very excited about it. But the issue is now with Josh Downs here, obviously Josh Downs is a lot less appealing based off the passing volume going down in this Colts offense. But Neighbors to Puka, I mean, you get the extra game played out of Puka here as well. BC Caleb coming out with their next question. This is Myers and Debo for Neighbors. I'm definitely going to go with Neighbors. I mean, Neighbors bad offense. That's why I didn't love drafting him in round 2 of underdog drafts this year. But at the same time, he's leading the NFL in targets per game. So you're getting effectively all the volume. And the schedule's not as bad the rest of the way. Now, Van Gilder's coming out with our next question. It says, super close on which running backs to play. Thank you. No, thank you. For me, I think we go Chase Brown relatively easily. I mean, the other guy would be James Cook, but we're going to get James Cook into the flex spot, so we don't really have to think about it too much. I think you bench Dobbins, where Dobbins now has a little bit more competition with Gus Edwards. Whereas James Cook's averaging a touchdown pretty much every single week at this point. If you are looking at Chase Brown, it's a tough matchup, but the man had 11 targets last week. So the usage as a receiver is there in a way that it's just, I mean, Dobbins gets used as a receiver some, but you're looking at like 11 targets within a 3-game span, not in a single game. So I go ahead and honestly, I think it's a very easy spot to just call Chase Brown and James Cook must start running backs until we potentially see a running back expand its role in Cincinnati. Now, mixing things up, says right now we're 5-5. The next 3 weeks are against the top 3 teams. Dear God. This is a 12-team formats. Running back afterwards, we'd have Bijan, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Pacheco. Wide receiver, we'd have St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. So you have enough depth at wide receiver. You can make this deal. Go get the best player with Bijan. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we could say with this. I mean, if it was a league in which you started, say, 2 flex spots, 3 flex spots, then maybe consider holding on to the additional wide receiver starter with McLaurin. It's just, I don't know. I mean, it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. So the main priority, of course, is going to be going through and instead focusing in on the upside. JP says the Bijan bye is rough there. The Bijan bye doesn't matter. Chase Brown has the same bye week. Terry McLaurin has a bye week in week 14. So all these players will miss the same amount of time rest of season. Now let's go ahead and refresh this. I'm actually going to exit out and get back in here. Just to make sure if anybody updated their profile pics, we get some new ones in. And yes, it looks like we have some new profile pics to look at. Let's freaking go. Let me turn on the fan too. Okay. Next question coming out from BMV. Really appreciate you. Going to be excited to check this out. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start sit question here. My guy says, big money league, pulled the trigger on sending Zay Flowers for Pacheco and Tracy. Great move. 6 teams make the playoffs. Okay, so if 6 teams make the playoffs, the regular season doesn't matter here. Maybe it does to get a bye, but pretty much everybody is going to be in the playoffs. So going through and getting assets like Isaiah Pacheco that could give you that crazy high ceiling for weeks 15, 16, 17 makes a lot of sense. Trade deadlines this week. Appreciate any of your help. No, appreciate you, my guy. Excited to check this out. The team that we have at the moment, it looks like we changed our name. I'm thinking maybe we are Brandon V26 because that's the most similar to the name. And yeah, this is the team with Pacheco as well. So that's what we're going to assume that we're rocking with. Now, a couple different things. One, it's an 8-team league. So expectations are the waiver wire has a bunch of viable options. And our team is very good. Like, obviously, here to be a running back 2, you don't just have to be a top 24 guy. You have to be a top 16 guy. So we go through and we raise the expectations dramatically. What I will say that I really like what y'all did here with this being an 8-team league. Is that because I completely understand you can only get 7 other guys to do a league with you, 7 other girls to do a league with you, whatever it is. That's all you can get. But the issue is when you're in like an 8-team league and then you make it where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. And then at that point, it's like, oh, okay, well, depth doesn't matter at all. So here, the fact that you can actually get a bunch of players into your starting lineup is a really good thing to see to make depth a little bit more important. Now, it is a 2-quarterback league, which typically in a regular 2-quarterback format, obviously it'd be difficult to go through and find quarterback production. But here, 8-team league, right? So everybody on average should be able to have 4 starting quarterbacks. So we're not necessarily super concerned about that. And looking at what you have currently at QB, we are currently rolling with Jalen Hurts, CJ Stroud, as well as Tua. So quarterback, we're going to be fine. There are strong quarterback options on the waiver wire as well. So if you ever wanted to go ahead and pivot to a different option, maybe if you don't like what you have from Tua this week, after if he disappoints in this, what should be a very good matchup against the Raiders, if you wanted to pivot over and if you really wanted to instead go with Sam Darnold off the waiver wire, you have that option because it's a 8-team league. Now, going over to what we have at running back. We are currently sitting with Bijan Robinson. So a locked and loaded RB1. Doesn't matter if it's a 12-team format or an 8-team league. Bijan's top 8 running back. We have an RB1. We have Pacheco, Swift. Could be a viable RB2, RB3 candidates rest of season. We have a bunch of running back depth pieces here. The very clear move, if you can make it, is taking one of these depth running backs that we don't particularly need ourselves and see if we can go get an upgrade at wide receiver. Where if you could potentially take DeAndre Swift, who's about to have a very tough slate of games over the next 5-ish weeks. If you could possibly take Swift and send him in a 2-for-1 deal with Devonta Smith or with Jalen Waddle to go get a viable upgrade at wide receiver, I think that'd make a ton of sense. And another potential trade that you could actually look to make as well is knowing that it's an 8-team league and that everybody's going to be strong at running back. Everybody should be strong at wide receiver. One of the few ways that you can differentiate your roster is by having the top end tight end. So if you wanted to see if you could go ahead and package together the combo of Kyle Pitts as well as DeAndre Swift or Kyle Pitts and Tyrone Tracy to see if we could get an upgrade specifically there at tight ends, I think that would be a really nice move if possible. Looking at maybe a couple of the teams that have those viable tight ends, this team is both Brock Bowers as well as Cade Otton. The issue is obviously they don't really need help at running back. Maybe with the Lawrence injury, they need another quarterback here. If you could potentially send them, say the combo of maybe CJ Stroud and Kyle Pitts in a Superflex league to go get 2 Brock Bowers. Maybe it seems like a steep price point in a Superflex league, but if you could then just turn around and pick up, say, Sam Darnold or Matthew Stafford for free off the waiver wire, it's not that much of a downgrade, to be honest. I think that's a move that you could look at making. Or again, trying to stick with selling one of the running backs. The just difficulty with the running backs is you can't find too many people who need them. I mean, this team loses Javonte, and maybe they think they need an extra running back. They have both Kittle and Andrews. Maybe they think that Andrews is viable going into the future. If you could send them, say, DeAndre Swift and Kyle Pitts to go get George Kittle, I think that'd be very interesting. That's another move that we could try to make here. But obviously in an 8-team league, it's going to be difficult to come up with a ton of stuff. The waiver wire, it's not like you have a bunch of players that are super interesting that we should just be making instant churns on our team. I think that you've already done a great job on waivers, and I'm not really looking to pivot off of anything there. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, I did hook you up with both the free start sit question as well as the free trade question too. So if there is anything else that you want to send my way, don't hesitate to. I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you. But thank you again for being a member of the flock, of course. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way here, and really hope I get to see you in a stream again. Now let's move this over to our next question coming out from Michael L. James. Says 5-5. We have Hurts, Rico, Tank, Hill, AJ, Laporta, DJ. I don't know, question mark. Okay. So looking at this, Laporta versus McBride. Give me McBride. Downs versus DJ Moore. They're about the same. Jalen Hurts versus James Cook. Kind of depends on your quarterback. If you're telling me our top running backs at the moment are Rico Dowdle and Tank Bigsby, you cannot afford the elite level quarterback. And yes, you sadly have no other option but to go ahead and sell Jalen Hurts. Obviously, 99.9% of the time, I don't want to sell Hurts. Hurts is averaging a rushing touchdown per game this season. But we're getting the clear upgrade at tight ends. We need wins right now. If you're telling me our starting running backs are Rico Dowdle, Tank Bigsby, you go ahead and you make this deal. Just because you have no other option. It's not like there have been any viable running back waiver wire additions. Now, going over to our next question, coming out from Eli Davis. Appreciate you, my guy. Also, we get an updated profile pic here. You love to see it. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question as well. Saying, what's up, Mason? Dropped Benson for Disley today because I'm worried about Ingram's quarterback and matchup this week. Currently tied 4th at 5-5. Do you have any suggestions? Love the content, brother. Appreciate you, my guys. So yeah, here Disley, obviously, if you have no Hurst, he does look viable. It's a good matchup as well, so I completely understand you going for it. I would still probably go Ingram. While I understand the matchup's garbage, the offense is garbage, you still have consistently 10 targets going in the direction of Evan Ingram. And you are getting the cheap receptions here for a full PPR format. So I honestly think you're better off. Because the thing is, too, like you holding on Disley. Even if you think that Disley projects out to score half a point more than Evan Ingram this week, at the same time, you are having to spend a roster spot where you could instead decide to pivot over and look to pick up one of the premium handcuff running backs that are an injury away from making a difference, such as Trey Benson, Tajay Spears, or Roshan. So for me, again, I think you can kind of go back and forth, and I understand the concerns that you have with Ingram. But my thing is, they're close enough where I'd rather not even have that argument. And I'd rather just say it's a better use of the roster spot for you to instead look to pick up another running back like Benson off waivers. So for me, I would cut Disley. I would pick up Trey Benson. Quarterback, we have Baker, Goff. Baker may actually be better coming out of the bye week, given the fact that he could be getting Mike Evans back. So obviously that is an exciting addition here to this offense. Looking at what we have with a running back, we presumably have 2 RB1s that we can start every single week with the combo of Breece and Taylor. We have Jacobs as a very exciting RB2. Al Jacobs on my team would be my RB1. We have Tracy as a viable option here as well. It's a league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So the running back depth doesn't matter a ton. So I would say, oh, maybe we can go ahead. Maybe we can trade, say, Tracy and go and get an upgrade at wide receiver. But the thing is, you're freaking nuts at receiver here as well. I mean, we were sitting with Jamar Chase. Tyreek Hill is your wide receiver too. Obviously, Tyreek Hill has been a horrendous round 1 pick. But if Tyreek's your second wide receiver, I would be excited about that. Harrison's your wide receiver 3. Harrison in round 1 of underdog drafts, probably a pretty bad idea for anybody who took him there, but Harrison is your wide receiver 3. That's great. So wide receiver is nuts. You know what I actually think you should do with this roster is I think you can make a play for either an elite quarterback or an elite tight end, especially in a league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. Like, I think you can go ahead and you can afford to make that pivot. Obviously, the main thing we're going to look to do here is try to find a team that needs some help at running back. This team has James Conner, Rachaad White, and Devin Singletary, and that's it. At RB, I mean, hell, if you could send them a viable RB, where if you could pivot from like Jacobs and Baker Mayfield to get to Lamar Jackson, that would be just an absolute no-brainer if you could. Another team that needs some help at running back here, the issue is they don't have anybody viable at quarterback or tight ends. This team at running back, they have Montgomery, Swift, Brian Robinson, so maybe they think they're fine at RB. But, I mean, I would just throw out a feeler with them because they also have the elite quarterback and the elite tight ends. You could very easily see them potentially wanting to go out there and trade for a viable running back piece like Josh Jacobs. We're obviously selling Jacobs for us isn't too tough because you have Tracy to backfill. And it could put you in a really rewarding spot if you're able to get that elite quarterback, if you're able to get that elite tight ends. So that's the main thing I would be looking to do if I were you. One, I think I would probably drop Disley, pick up Trey Benson, get the running back that's an injury away from turning into a must-start option. If you wanted to say, well, James Conner can't get hurt this week, it's his bye, then sure, instead, just go get Tajay Spears. Doesn't really matter the exact player. It's more so the overall thought process with it. And then also seeing if we could sell one of the depth RBs and instead pivot over to what you have with an upgrade long-term, either to a stud QB or a stud tight end. But I think that's all I got for you. I really do appreciate you. I hooked you up with both a free start sit question as well as a free trade question. So if there is anything else that you want, don't hesitate to send it over my direction. I'll be super happy to take a look at it for you, my friend. But thank you again for everything, of course. And I really do appreciate you. But let's move this over to our next question. This is a dynasty team. This is one of those free underdog team reviews. Appreciate you. Other Jeff says, in a rebuild, thinking about downgrading at quarterback to acquire more draft capital, let me know. Okay. So our team name is Burrow's Heroes. We are 5th in the league analyzer. It is a 10-team Superflex Start 9 league. So if we are looking at what we have with a quarterback room in a 10-team Superflex league, definitely going to be a little bit different than a QB room than a 12-teamer. Because here in a 10-team Superflex format, we should expect that everybody has enough quarterback production. Maybe they don't have the high end, but they should be looking at least at starting quarterbacks. As if you just do the simple math, you should have 3 to 4 starters for everybody here. So typically trying to sell guys like Daniel Jones, trying to sell somebody like Sam Darnold in a 12-team Superflex league where somebody's desperate for a starter, you definitely could get that pivot. The issue is in a 10-team Superflex league, nobody's going to be trading for those players. So if you were looking to sell someone here, the guy that you would be selling would either be Burrow or Caleb. I don't see a team that's a contending roster finding more value from Caleb Williams than ourselves. I think really the only quarterback that could make sense for you to go ahead and sell. And for anybody who's wondering this is Dynasty. It's very different in terms of the set of rankings. If you were looking at Burrow, I could see a world in which a contending team would be willing to pay up for Joe Burrow and give you more long-term value than Burrow himself, is obviously they're getting the additional production of Burrow right now. Looking at what we have with running back, we have Trey Benson, DeAndre Swift, Charbonnet, Travis Etienne. So, I mean, if we're looking at pretty much any of these running backs, anybody that's not a rookie should be seeing less value in the offseason than they have right now on average. So as an example of this, looking at DeAndre Swift, Swift is the easiest sell here for a rebuilding team in Dynasty. We're on a rebuilding roster. We are primarily focused in on what the value of these players will be 3 months from now. And looking to package Swifts with somebody, I think the easy package is trying to send Swift and Higgins and a 2-for-1 deal to go get maybe a wide receiver for the long term and a rookie pick as well. Assets that we are comfortable and projecting them to get better as time goes on. Looking at the teams that could potentially pay that price, maybe selling the combination of Higgins and Swift for Olave and a first. That would be a phenomenal move for us if possible. Of course, much easier said than done. This other team that's 6-4, looking at a receiver that maybe has more long-term value than short-term. Don't really have one of those options right now. This team has Brian Thomas. Maybe sending them DeAndre Swift as well as T. Higgins for Brian Thomas. Now that you have the Lawrence injury and Thomas doesn't particularly look viable at the moment, maybe they are willing to make that pivot. We're obviously, I think that would be helping them in the short term, helping us in the long term. And then again, if you were looking to sell anybody here at quarterback, really the only guy that I would expect you to be able to get some value for would end up being probably Burrow. Just the issue with that is it's not like Burrow's going to see a tremendous fall in value this offseason. So if you are selling Burrow, I think you're at a spot in which you need to be overly compensated. You need to get an absolute no-brainer price. But the good part of selling Burrow, of course, is it would put us in a spot where we are probably losing games rest of season. So we would get a better rookie pick in the offseason. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that free Underdog team review. But our next question coming out from Ben C. says 7-3 was offered this. We got no depth and we want some opinions. This is Jefferson versus Brees and Puka. If you truly have no depth, you can go for it. But let me look at this. Running back, we have Achane, Kyron. Wide receiver, we have London, Tyreek, Brian Thomas, and Jefferson. It's a 10-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. Well, if you are not comfortable with the depth that you have, I think it's a fair price point to go get Puka and Brees. But it's definitely not something that you need to do because in your league, depth's not going to be that important. There should be decent options off the waiver wire, and you do have plenty of depth at the same time. Okay, so let's move this over to our next question coming out from Dan Arcade. Always happy to see you. This is waivers. We have Jameis, At quarterback, Disley at tight end. I still go Geno here over Jameis. Put Ridley in the flex. Reed is a bad matchup or no. And then should we go with Myers? So we have Ertz this week. I would go Ladd in one of the flex spots. Ladd has a great matchup going up against Cincy where potentially I'd go Ladd and Reed. Actually, are we getting over our skis with Ladd? No, you have a 24-point implied team total for the Chargers here. You're down at 16.5 for the Titans. You're down at 17 for the Raiders. Obviously, you have safer target volume if you're looking at what you have from Calvin Ridley and Jacoby Myers. Whereas we should expect fewer targets, but more efficiency and more touchdown upside from what you were going to get with Jaden Reed and Ladd McConkey. It obviously is a tough spot after you see Ridley just absolutely dominate this past week, though. And obviously, you've had a considerable amount of target volume consistently here for Ridley as well. Now, Quinn Taylor coming out with our next question. Here we have Goff, Adams versus Kyler and Reed. Give me Kyler over Goff. Give me Adams over Reed. It's I don't know the exact league settings here. I'd probably go with the Reed and Kyler side. Obviously, we've been talking about this for quite some time, but Kyler, you do get the rushing upside, of course. So he is definitely in the tier of guys that you start no matter what the matchup is every single week. Whereas Goff is effectively just a streaming guy that's barely worth the roster spot. Now, B. Witness coming out of the trade. This is Dowdle and Harrison versus Neighbors. This is very easily Neighbors for me. I mean, Dowdle's in such a bad offense at this point that he just doesn't look startable. And obviously, Harrison is in a better offense than what you have with Neighbors, but the target volume is double for Neighbors than what it is for Harrison. So you just get the consistency with Neighbors that you don't with Harrison. Now, Payne coming out with the next question. This is Walker and Lamb versus Dowdle and St. Brown. St. Brown, Walker, lateral move up to you. Lamb versus Dowdle, give me Lamb. So I'm going to go with the Walker and CeeDee Lamb side. Obviously, we were talking last week a lot about selling CeeDee Lamb with how bad the offense is going to be, but that was at a much higher price tag. Here, while yes, the Dallas offense is disgusting, and for that reason, if you can get out of Lamb at a decent price point, I would like to do so. The issue is you're buying into another option in a disgusting offense with Rico Dowdle. So I'd probably rather just have Walker and Lamb. Okay, let me refresh this. Ivan will have our next question here. And I thought this live stream was maybe going to be a little bit shorter than it looks to be. Your boy may have to fill up his water. We'll see what we can do here. Ivan coming out says, hey, Mason, Saturday is my trade deadline. Do we ride it with the current squad or pivot off one of the studs and go get an elite receiver? Help me. Really appreciate you, my guy. Excited to check this out. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question, just in case there's anything else that you want to follow up on here. But team name is Joe Zasty, whatever the hell it is. We are currently sitting at third in the league analyzer. We are currently 7-3. So we are in a very comfortable spot to just be thinking fantasy football playoff upside and not particularly caring too much about what we have in the short term here. Now, looking at what we have at quarterback, we are currently rolling with Burrow and Herbert. Obviously, there's no world in which we're ever starting Herbert over Burrow, but completely understands wanting to roster Herbert, play him in week 12. We had just looked up his matchup. Can't I remember what it is? I think it's Baltimore, which should be a good spot for him. But honestly, leaving the bye week, then at that point, we cut Herbert. We just pick up another running back because there's no world in which you're starting Herbert over a healthy Burrow, especially if we have Higgins back in at least after the bye week. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with 2 locked and loaded RB1s every single week with Mixon and Gibbs. We have Taylor here as another very exciting RB as our running back 3. So Running backs on absolute lock for us. It is a league where depth is a little bit more important, where you can start up to 4 wide receivers weekly. So obviously expectation for this roster as it stands right now is, of course, we are planning on starting every single one of these running backs every week that we can. We are going to have to deal with the week 14 bye for both Mixon and Taylor, but not the end of the world, right? We don't need to panic about bye weeks on a team that's guaranteed to go to the playoffs. Going over to wide receiver, we have Debo and Adams. So definitely not the strong spot on the roster, but we should be able to get by with this. We have Rome, Addison, Dobbs. Looking at the wide receiver depth pieces that we have on the waiver wire, if you wanted to pick up, say, Keenan Allen instead of Romeo Dobbs, I wouldn't fault you for it if you think that the change with the offensive coordinator is going to be able to save the Chicago Bears. If you don't think so, I think obviously you're just chilling with Dobbs. The thing with this team that's really interesting is it's a team where we decided to go studs and duds, right? We had the studs at the very top, but we don't have a lot of depth with it, which is great for the fantasy football playoff stretch. Like typically in a playoff team where we're not too concerned about bye weeks, then yeah, we go ahead and we look to sell our depth assets to go get improvements inside the starting lineup. But if you were going to make any additional trades at this point, realistically speaking, what's the move? Realistically speaking, what could you do here? Obviously, nobody's trading for Rome, Addison, Dobbs. At this point, you would possibly really only be looking at pivoting from Taylor to a wide receiver. There's just not really a reason to do so. I think if you're making a trade with this team with how it's currently constructed, you're just doing so because you're bored. You're just doing it to do it. I think it's a great team. The only thing I would do is once you get through the bye week for Burrow, you cut Herbert, you go pick up another running back or wide receiver off waivers, and we roll into the playoffs as is. As obviously you are in a great spot here. But I really appreciate you and really wish I had more for you, to be honest. I did hook you up with a free start sit question or free trade question as well, just in case there is anything that you wanted to send in my direction. But team's already in a great spot. I don't think you have to do much, to be honest. But let's move this over to our next question. Coming out from Parrish. Love the profile pic. I need to figure out what kind of bird this is. Quarterback, Stafford, Nix. Probably going to go ahead and take Bo Nix. You actually have really good projections here for the Denver Broncos offense this week. Much better than we're typically used to seeing. Running back, we're going to go Pollard over Madison. Wide receiver, we go London over Smith, despite London having a tough matchup. And wide receiver, we're going to go Smith over Madison. But with Smith playing on Thursday, we're going to go Smith at wide receiver, and then we're going to go London in the flex, just in case anything happens later in the week where you potentially need a pivot. Okay, so let's move this over to our next question. This one coming out from Quentin says, what are your thoughts? I would get the AJ side. Okay, London, AJ Brown, upgrade, Bowers. This is the London Bowers side. You did not do this. I think London is a lot closer to AJ Brown than Bowers is to Sam Laporta, especially with Laporta now injured. And to be honest with you, I hate saying this. I drafted Laporta all offseason. I love drafting him in round 4. I got excited about it. And I distinctly remember the one live stream, someone saying, Mason, stop drafting Laporta in round 4. You can get Bowers, who's the same guy, 6 rounds later. And me making a big deal out about, Oh, he's not the same guy. Yada, 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 yada. Laporta's so much. And then you know what ends up happening? Of course, they're not the same guy. Instead, Bowers is in a completely different tier. So I would love to say that we want the A.J. Brown and Sam Laporta side. But I think Bowers is in a completely different tier than what you have with Laporta at this point. You go with London and Bowers. Okay. Now, B-Dub coming out with our next question. It's a trade where we're sending Mixon and JSN for Garrett Wilson. I'd rather have Mixon straight up over Garrett Wilson. Oh, this is a dynasty trade. I apologize. Dynasty deal. Yes, we are going to go ahead. We will take the Garrett Wilson side. With Joe Mixon, obviously, has been phenomenal this season. And even if you think that he could be viable in 2025, the fact of the matter is you are going to see a pretty big hit when it comes to his actual dynasty value this offseason. And if you're looking at value 2 months from now, the Garrett Wilson side is going to be significantly more valuable during this offseason. Now, of course, if you're a contending team, I completely understand wanting to hold on to Mixon, but I'm assuming you're probably not looking to contend if we are trying to get rid of him. Now, moving this over to our next question, coming out from the Notorious One. Always happy to see us. Say, brother, appreciate you. Should we trade Otten for Brian Robinson or Chase Brown, or don't trade? Need the running back help. 100%. Go get Chase Brown. I would do it for either RB. I would prefer Chase Brown over Brian Robinson. But one thing trying to figure out about specifically with Cade Otton is obviously he's been a very strong option. But are we going to expect the targets to potentially come down? With Evans coming back into this offense. I think that is a real concern that you have to have here. So if you can pivot over to Chase Brown, it looks like, the starting running back, one of the league's best offenses that has a receiving role. I think it is a really nice spot. Now, our next question coming out from B-Dub again. This is A-Rich versus Brooks. It's a Dynasty Superflex League. Posts news of A-Rich starting again. Team looks like it can contend. A team looks like it can contend. Give me A-Rich. So the thing in a Superflex League, A-Rich has a better shot to make a difference for you than what you are going to get with Jonathan Brooks. Trying to think if there's an argument. The thing is, you have crazy production at running back as well. So Superflex Dynasty League, with your context, I think we're going to go A-Rich. But Rev McSavage coming out with our next question. Says, I'm 4-6. Playoffs are the top 6 teams. Running back position has been brutal. Are there any moves to be made for a playoff push? Keep up the good work. Love the content. Really appreciate you, my guy. Excited to check this out. This is 6 and 7s. We are 9th in the league analyzer here. It's a 12-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. We are 4-6. It's not a spot where it's win or go home yet. You could make the playoffs with 7 losses. Obviously, it'll be pretty much impossible to make the playoffs with 8 losses. It's pretty close to do or die. Just not officially do or die at this point. Looking at quarterback, we have Josh Allen. So we have a quarterback where you're able to start him every single week, regardless of the matchup. The only issue that you could potentially have here is, obviously, you have the bye week in week 12. So you are going to have to cover for Allen in the week 12 bye, which isn't a super big concern if you're looking at a team that's playoff bounds. But here, where we are trying to win out to get into the playoffs, obviously we can take one loss, but can't have more than one. Kind of need to go 3-1 from here on out. You don't love having the quarterback on the bye. Going over to what we have at running back. We are currently sitting with Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Zach Charbonnet, Tyler Algier, Jalen Warren. So running back would probably be one of the biggest concerns. I absolutely hate to say it. You need to sell Josh Allen here. I mean, it sucks. But if you are looking at this team, your starting lineup includes Nick Chubb, Jalen Waddle right now. Again, we are pretty damn close to having to try to win out at this point. You need to send Allen to a playoff team that has plenty of depth where we can get a strong option at running back and wide receiver. Looking at what we have with those potential teams, this team needs help at quarterback. They don't really have depth elsewhere, though. This team could use some help at quarterback. If you could send Allen and get back if you could send Allen for Nico, it's a no-brainer. You just can't. Please tell me there's somebody that makes sense to trade with here. This team, I think, could make a lot of sense. The issue is the teams that need quarterback, they don't really have running back either. This team streaming quarterback, maybe if you wanted to send them Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, and try to get back in return David Njoku. The thing is, we can't even ask for Terry McLaurin because then what? They're starting Quentin Johnston and Tyler Lockett, which is even worse than us. We can ask for it, but we're trying to think of something that people would actually be willing to potentially do. Decimus Burrow. If you could send Allen and go get Josh Jacobs, Garrett Wilson, and then we just go through and we stream the quarterback position. We pick up May, we pick up Richardson, whoever it may be, probably picking up Drake May in that instance. I think that would be a nice pivot to make, and very rarely in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. But here, where you're having to start Chubb and Waddle, I do think you're in a situation in which the path to go 3-1 at least over the next month is to sadly get rid of the elite level quarterback and bring in some viable running back and wide receiver starters. But again, thank you so much for taking advantage of the free Underdog team review. I really do appreciate it. But Pedro coming out with their next question. 6-4. Do I go Miami or Texans defense? I have Najee for the flex. Both defenses are great this week. I would prefer the Texans. Quarterback, I'm going to go with Goff. You have the highest implied team total of any team in the NFL. A lot of that should come on the ground, though. HN is going to crush this week. Chase Brown, Kenneth Walker, both running backs have tough matchups. We go Walker. And then I think you could consider Chase Brown over Drake London there at the flex, to be honest with you. London has a very, very tough matchup going up against Denver, which has effectively shut down, pretty much every opposing wide receiver one that they've played so far this season. So it's not a very easy spot, but I think you could consider where you had the 11 targets for Chase Brown last week. How many games this year has Drake London had 11 targets? Now, Bo Peel coming out with their next question says, looking for help with this week's lineup. Thanks. Thank you. Running back, we have Walker, Achane, absolute must-start plays. Obviously, Walker, tough matchup against the Niners. Doesn't matter. He'll get the receiving usage regardless. Garrett Wilson and Zay Flowers will be our two receivers. Tight end, Hawkinson. And then down in the flex, we're going to go right back to running back. We probably take Brees. Josh Jacobs in a tougher matchup as well, going up against Chicago in what should be a very low-scoring game environment. But let's go ahead and refresh this. Okay, perfect. I think we can go without getting water. I think we're good. But Yonder coming out with a team review. Appreciate you, my guy. Let me go ahead and hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start sit question too, just in case there's anything else that you wanted to send my direction. But here says, what do we do, Mason? Really want to win the championship this year because we lost in the championship last season. Let me know what you think we should do with the team. By the way, trades are hard to come by in my league. So basically got to sell high, buy low, but down for any plays you think. Thanks, my man. No, thank you so much. Excited to check this out. Looking at this team, I think it's a very funny league to view because you can see with the league analyzer, there are 5 teams at the very top and 5 teams at the very bottom that are separated in a big time way. There is a massive gap between the two of them. So this is like the league with the haves and the haves not. You have 5 teams that are actually contending, 5 teams that are really not in the mix at all. We are currently 7-3, so obviously we are a little more willing to prioritize the fantasy football playoff upside of these options. So if we are looking to sell high on any players, it is potentially going to be the options where they could be better in the short term than the long term here. Starting off at quarterback, obviously we are in a really good spot. No matter what, we have Jalen Hurts. You're able to start Jalen Hurts every single week, regardless of the matchup. He's already through the bye week as well, so you don't need to roster another quarterback. You can go through and you can just use that extra roster spot on another running back or receiver. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with Achane. So we have a locked and loaded RB1 every single week. You've had one game this year without Tua. With Tua, where he hasn't hit 25 fantasy points. Looking at what you have with Gibbs, another locked and loaded RB1 here rest of season. Where he's already through the bye as well. So you're not really having to concern yourself too much with depth. Dowdle is in a crappy offense. My thing I would look to do if you were going to make a trade with this team, with this league, I know you said it was difficult to make trades in general. But I think if you wanted to make a long-term upgrade at wide receiver by potentially trying to send Darnell Mooney, who obviously has been phenomenal. Darnell Mooney's right now the wide receiver 8 in total fantasy points scored. But if you could send Mooney and Kareem Hunt and pivot over to a wide receiver 1 that we're pretty confident for the fantasy football playoff stretch with, for me, I think that could be very appealing, knowing that with Hunt, even if he does have a role when Pacheco comes back, the role won't be large enough where you can reasonably start Kareem Hunt at any point. If there's another pivot that we potentially want to make here, that's an easy one to do off the waiver wire. It's dropping a player like Braylon Allen and picking up Charbonnet. Because if I'm viewing Braylon Allen and Zach Charbonnet, they're kind of the exact same running back. And that they are just absolute desperation plays where if you really needed to put somebody in the starting lineup, you could. But more so, they are premium handcuff backs where if you were to get an injury to one of them, then, to one of the running backs in front of them, then they do kind of turn into league winners. My thought process is it looks like the Seahawks should be in a better offense. Not only should the Seahawks be in a better offense, but at the same time, we've seen Charbonnet with no Kenneth Walker, and Charbonnet was a 3-down bell cow, where we are more so just projecting what could be with Braylon. So I'd make that waiver wire pivot on a team that's 7-3, where we are primarily thinking about fantasy football playoff upside. I know you said it was difficult to make trades in your league, but if you can find a team that needs a running back and is not guaranteed that playoff spot at the moment, potentially sending them a 2-for-1 deal involving Kareem Hunt and Darnell Mooney to go get an absolute stud at wide receiver for the fantasy football playoffs. I think that'd be very interesting. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much, of course, for being a member of the flock. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. And I did hook you up with both a free start sit question as well as a free trade question too. So if there's anything else that you wanted me to look at, please don't hesitate to send it over my way. I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you. But our next question coming out from just the two of us says, hey, Mason, hook 'em horns, hook 'em my guy. 8-2 right now, trying to go all the way this year. Let me know if you think there are any other trades for the team. Appreciate you. 8-2, where we are looking just for the long-term upside. Pivoting off of Kareem Hunt to go get some viable production right this second and go get that upgrade to Nico Collins. I do think that this is an absolute no-brainer. I would really like to make this move. And if there were any other trades that you could potentially make with our team currently, I think you're already doing exactly what we would want essentially, which is especially when you have the running back production at the top, like you don't necessarily need to even start Kareem Hunt in the short term. As we want to be going through and we want to be selling Kareem Hunt in a 2-for-1 deal to go get an upgrade elsewhere. Now, obviously, you can try to be a little bit creative with how you do this, where if you look at some of the other potential pivots, you could maybe try to send like Jordan Love and Kareem Hunt to go get a Mount Rushmore quarterback, or send Kareem Hunt and Tucker Kraft to go get an elite level tight ends. But regardless of what you're doing here, this is pretty much the thought process that we would want to run with. But let me hook you up also with a free trade question, just in case you have something else you want to send my way. You can if you have another trade idea, but this is definitely the structure of a deal that we want to be making though. Now, Mussy Man coming out with our next question. Says, we have Pacheco 5-5. How do you feel about Evans rest of season versus DK? I think you get the extra game from DK Metcalf, so I'd put Metcalf ahead of Evans in our rest of season rankings. But points per game, I would actually probably take Evans over Metcalf. Again, if you are just thinking about points per game here. And then looking at Pollard to Hunt, downgrade, Ridley to Bucky, lateral move, up to you. Dear God. I would probably rather have the Metcalf side if you really wanted to make this deal. I think you at least keep Pollard and have them keep Hunt. I understand that we have Pacheco, but still. We're effectively just giving up the long-term running back where you don't necessarily need to. Now, Villovia, something like that. Via Livia coming out says, worried about the Tyreek injury. We have Waddle as insurance. I wouldn't do this at all because the thing is, Waddle hasn't shown us that he can be viable at any point this season. Waddle hasn't had 10 fantasy points since week 1. And I mean, obviously, we see Waddle this past week with the Tyreek injury. And I mean, as long as Tyreek's on the field, it's not like Waddle's seeing a crazy high target share by any stretch of the imagination here. So I think it would be a very difficult spot to go through and to tear down from Kyron to Neighbors, who's in an absolute garbage offense, just to pick up Waddle. Like, be completely honest with you, I have Waddle in the Flock League. I hope Waddle comes out here and crushes it. I just don't think that this is I don't know, nearly enough value. I think Waddle's more of a throw-in at this point, not somebody that you can include in a trade where we're trading away an absolute stud. But Santana coming out with their next question says, we have Bijan, Connor, St. Brown, Wilson, Bucky. Has Dal Carr Poffs? I have no idea what the hell that means. Would I rather have Bucky Irving or Tyreek Hill? Tyreek Hill by a mile. I don't know if I am missing something here. Again, I couldn't exactly read the very end of this. But if it's Tyreek Hill versus Bucky Irving, for the love of God, go get Tyreek Hill. I don't care remotely what our team is. It's Tyreek Hill by a mile. Now, if Eaton's coming out with their next question, says 7-3. CMC and Walker are my only running backs. I have both handcuffs. Do we do this deal? Wide receivers are Nico, Hill, Amari, and Tillman. No. Why would I just don't see why we would do this deal. Our wide receivers are strong enough where it's not like we need Higgins at all. You are significantly downgrading from Kenneth Walker to Tyrone Tracy. Tracy's in a much worse offense. Tracy doesn't have the same receiving usage. Tracy isn't nearly as good of a running back. So, yeah, I stick with the RB1, and I do so very comfortably as well. Please, for the love of God, go Kenneth Walker here. Now, PPAV coming out with our next question. Here, wide receiver, I think we are going to go ahead. We are going to take Jaden Reed as well as CeeDee Lamb. Where with Reed, obviously, you don't have the target volume, but you have the great quarterback play. With Lamb, you don't have the great quarterback play, but you have the target volume. They are pretty much the exact opposites here. And then going down to the flex, we have no James Conner this week. So if Higgins is going to go, I'm going to go with T. Higgins. If Higgins is not, then I think you pivot over to Cedric Tillman. Higgins was limited in practice. It sounded like he didn't do anything, but for whatever reason, they wanted to get him out there and mark him limited. But definitely practice reports are going to be massive with Higgins, obviously, for Thursday and Friday. So next question here. And let me go ahead and load up our new ones. Let's get back out and back in. Okay. Now, this question coming out from Ira John 28. Really appreciate you, my guy. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question, just in case there's something else that you want us to talk about that we may not cover initially here. Saying, any moves you think of 1 week until the trade deadline? Offered a 4-7 team, Dobbins for Pacheco. I'm still waiting to hear back. Great idea. I absolutely love that. And the thing is, if you're 4-7, legitimately, if I was 4-7 and I was sitting there and I was having to maybe start like Braylon Allen this week, and somebody offered me J.K. Dobbins for Isaiah Pacheco, where if you're 4-7, it's legitimately win or go home. You can't make the playoffs with 8 losses. I mean, in the vast majority of leagues, then you really do have to consider it. And obviously, if you are a playoff team, Like, you'd rather have Pacheco over Dobbins, or at least I would for the playoffs. So love that idea. Just holding on to Herbert and Hill for the bye fill-ins. Love the work you do, homie. Really appreciate you, my guy. Going to be excited to check this out. We are currently second in the league analyzer. We are a team that's 7-3. Completely understand holding on to Justin Herbert for the bye week. Obviously, we can go through. We can drop him after you get Kyler Murray back in. But, I mean, this is actually a pretty good week to be holding on to Herbert's, because this is a spot where you have a great matchup against Cincy, where potentially you actually have to see the Chargers, or you get to see the Chargers being forced to throw the football. And then obviously long-term Kyler Murray, you do have a ton of rushing upside. So we just immediately drop Herbert afterwards. Going over to running back, we have CMC back in. So we're a 7-3 team with McCaffrey. We have Dobbins, Pollard. To be honest with you, I would have lowballed the Pacheco owner. I would have sent them Pollard and then followed it up with Dobbins if they rejected Pollard. But anyway, we have the running back depth where you can't afford to make that move. The one thing that I would consider, and it just depends on how active your league is. Like, it's just crazy that Cade Otton's sitting out there on the waiver wire right now. But the issue with me telling you, like, oh, let's go pick up Cade Otton is, well, realistically speaking, who are we cutting? Or let's not even say who are we cutting. I mean, we can easily cut Christian Watson. That's no big deal. But if we go pick up Cade Otton, what's the path for him to actually hit our starting lineup? Because he's on the same bye that you have with McBride. Once we're past this week, we're never starting Cade Otton over McBride, especially with Kelsey back in. So it kind of sucks when you see that great option on the waiver wire and it's like, oh, okay, I can't really do anything about it. Going over to wide receiver, we are currently sitting with London, Wilson, Evans. So it's a really comfortable spot to be, but obviously we still have a bunch of bye weeks to go through here, so it's not like it's very easy to just go through and sell wide receiver depth to go get an upgrade elsewhere. Like London, Wilson, both the week 12 bye. We don't have Evans back quite yet. So this is a great team, specifically for a playoff roster where we are only starting 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. I think this is pretty much exactly where you want to find yourself. Trying to think through what you could potentially do at this point with this roster. I mean, it is very limited. I like the idea of you going through and you selling, say, J.K. Dobbins or Tony Pollard for a player like Pacheco, because obviously we are getting that upside specifically for weeks 15, 16, 17 for when we are in the fantasy football playoffs. The thing with that, though, is I don't think we necessarily need to be going overboard, because we already have a lot of upside here for this team to get better as time goes on. And realistically, I don't know. I mean, you have to deal with the London bye, the Wilson bye. Evans is injured. He has the bye. We have the McBride bye. We have the Kyler bye. So we are very limited with the depth plays that we can make right now. I think obviously once we get through week 11, then at that point we very easily cut Herbert. We cut Taysom. I think we could run over the waiver wire. I would prioritize in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, picking up the running backs that aren't injury away from making a big difference. I'd really like the guys like Estime, Charbonnet, Braylon Allen here at the very bottom end of the roster, especially when we're so strong at the top as we are. But obviously we can't make that move right now. We are waiting for these guys to get through their respective bye weeks. So I'm sorry. I wish I had more for you, but I think this is maybe all we have. I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, I did hook you up with both the free start sit question and the free trade question. If you have anything else, please send it my way. I really wish I had more. Again, for you. But honestly, you have a great team. It's a team that's pretty much optimized exactly how we would want it specifically for your league settings. So it is going to be difficult to do much more than what you've already done. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Now, Rip Godwin coming out with our next question says, might trade Pacheco for a wide receiver. We have Debo at wide receiver and then Chase Brown at the flex. You don't need to trade Pacheco for a receiver. You're chilling. If you're going to trade Pacheco, I would send maybe Pacheco and Purdy to go get like an elite quarterback if you wanted to do that. But in reality, I think you have a great team. I don't think you need to do anything. Now, mitigated frame, always happy to see us, says, just don't know which receiver to start this week in a non-PPR format. Thank you for clarifying it's non-PPR. Here I can see it's non-PPR with it being synced to the site, but every once in a while I'm a little bit sketched out that maybe the site's saying it's non-PPR and it's actually PPR. But anyway, non-PPR format, obviously the only thing we're doing is we're chasing touchdowns. Full PPR format, give me volume. Non-PPR league, give me touchdowns. Where do I think points are going to be scored? Indy, no. Chicago, hell no. Baltimore, San Fran's where we're at. I have a lot more faith with Flowers than I would with Pearsall. So I think we are going to go ahead and we're going to take Zay Flowers. I definitely don't think Flowers is like a must-start wide receiver every single week, regardless of the matchup. But you do have the weekly spike weeks. The random spike weeks. Not only do you have the random spike weeks, but at the same time, you do have touchdown upside in Baltimore in general. Now we, of course, need a little bit fewer of those touchdowns going to Derrick Henry and Mark Andrews, a little more going to Flowers, which, of course, is much easier said than done. Much, much easier said than done. Okay. Now, going over to what we have with our next question. This one coming out from Sandman. Say, massive dono with the team review. Really appreciate you, my guy. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question here as well. Saying, started out 6-2, drafted Hill and lost Godwin. Made a lot of trades to get here. Past 2 weeks, lost to Chase and another by 1 point. I think what I'm looking to do is trade away Reed and JSN for a higher end receiver or a running back. I did just trade Lamar and Kittle away to get Mixon, St. Brown, and Cup. Okay. I'm not going to lie to you, my guy. The second that I read I just traded Lamar away, I was about to tear into you. Going, I have no idea what the hell you're doing. Yada, yada, yada. But pretty decent return. Obviously, if you're selling Lamar, you need the other owner to go out there and give you a king's ransom. And it does seem like they did that. So, not a bad move at all. Now, going ahead and looking at our roster here. We are currently sitting at 5th in the league analyzer. Honestly, based off that trade, I thought we'd be a lot higher. I actually thought, I thought we'd have been a lot higher, to be honest with you. But anyway, quarterback, we are effectively just streaming the position at the moment. We are sitting with the combo of Cousins as well as Herbert. I think this week you actually probably have Herbert as a better option, just given the good matchup that you have going up against Cincy. Most weeks, to be honest with you, I probably would instead go Cousins. But tough matchup for Cousins, good matchup for Herbert. Running back, we have 2 running back ones that we can start pretty much every single week, regardless of matchup, with both Bijan as well as Mixon. We are 6-4, so we're not necessarily guaranteed the playoff spot, but we're still definitely thinking upside here, which makes it a little bit less of a big deal that both Bijan and Mixon are still going to be missing weeks due to buys. We have Algier, Estime, Cam Akers. Once we get official word that Aaron Jones is good to go, then I think you probably go ahead and you cut Aaron Jones, and instead we pick up either Gus Edwards or Khalil Herbert. Going over to wide receiver, we have St. Brown, Cup, Reed, JSN. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. So the depth definitely doesn't matter a ton, right? 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. We are more so focused in on trying to get improvements inside the starting lineup and selling the wide receiver depth pieces like Jaden Reed, as well as like JSN. But to be completely honest with you, this isn't necessarily a spot where we have a ton of depth that we can give up. Like, JSN's really our only depth piece. Like, we go through and we look at this team. You're starting Bijan and Mixon every week at running back. You're starting St. Brown, Cup, Reed every week at wide receivers in the flex. And then the next guy, the only other piece that really could be startable here for you would be Jackson Smith-Njigba. So I don't mind you whatsoever deciding that you want to trade JSN, but I don't like the idea of trading like JSN and Jaden Reed in a 2-for-1 deal to go get a running back. Like, let me see the wide receivers we have on the waiver wire. You have Pittman, Christian Watson, so it's not like we have great receivers that we could just easily pick up. This is boring, and it's probably not worth it for you to do, so it would be worth it for you to do. But it's probably going to be impossible for you to actually find somebody to be willing to do it with you. If you could pivot over from Jackson Smith-Njigba and instead get an option such as, I mean, maybe even a running back that I'm not a fan of that is on the decline, such as Tony Pollard, it is something that you would look at here, especially with the way that this roster is constructed, where if anything goes down to Mixon, we are in trouble. Or even just in week 12, week 14, we're in trouble. Who the hell are we going to start? We're going to start Tyler Algier. We're going to start Audric Estime. Where if you wanted to trade the depth wide receiver piece in JSN just for a depth running back straight up, I think that is something you could look to do. But again, it's much easier said than done, because the issue is it's a league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So while, of course, we would want to go ahead and we would want to get rid of the wide receiver depth piece such as Jackson Smith-Njigba, is it a spot where anybody else in your league's interested in trading for JSN? I don't think so. So you can go for it, my guy. But to be honest with you, while I agree that wide receiver depth in your league doesn't really matter much, our depth with this team's already extremely limited to the point where I think it will be very difficult for us to make a deal. And if you are trading away a depth piece here, I think that you are effectively just going to need to ask for a depth piece at a different position in return. So if you wanted to sell the depth piece of JSN, I think you just look for maybe, I don't know, a depth running back here instead. That is the main thing that I would be looking at. But it's a roster primarily that really just needs to be churning the waiver wire as it stands. Again, if Aaron Jones is back, you cut Cam Akers. You go pick up a running back like Gus Edwards or Khalil Herbert. And then I really think that's all I got for you, my guy. But sucks to lose the way that we did over the past 2 weeks. Obviously, we're not expecting that to be the case every single week going into the future. But Really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. It's just very difficult where it's a league where we want to be selling depth to get upgrades inside the starting lineup, but you don't necessarily have any depth to sell. So we're just kind of stuck sitting on our hands because the team's already how you'd want it, to be honest. Now, Rich Pedro coming out with our next question. This is 6-4, great matchup. Need wins before bye Mageddon. What's the bye Mageddon here for us? Week 14, we'll have Lamar, Mixon, Flowers. Okay. I actually get so freaking lucky. I was looking at my matchups that I have coming up. This week, the team I play, they have Neighbors, Evans, both on bye, and McBride on bye. The team I play next week has Kamara and Devontae Adams on bye. And the team I play in week 14 has Lamar on bye. So I am very, very lucky with how things shape up with the teams I'm going up against and their bye week soon. But anyway, here, your team, you're in a great spot. Play Mixon, play Chase Brown. Obviously, a lot riding on the Flowers-Lamar stack. It really just comes down to the flex on where you have to start thinking through these things. Romeo, it will be Jalen Warren. It'll be an absolute no-brainer if Najee Harris misses. If you have no Najee Harris, you play Jalen Warren, and you do not even think twice about it. Now, the issue, of course, is if Najee does play, then Jalen Warren's not viable. And if we look at our wide receiver rankings this week, I have Dobbs at 38, I have Jameson at 37, and I have Addison at 39. So I literally have all three of these wide receivers ranked back to back to back. As it stands now, I'd probably just go Jameson and set up a prayer that you get the long receiving touchdown. The positive that you have with Jameson is it should be the best offense here in the league this week, or at least that's what sportsbooks are projecting out with a 30-point implied team total. Now, AEW coming out with their next question says, trade away Kyron Downs for Brees and Hopkins. Kyron to Brees, downgrade. Downs to Hopkins, upgrade. This would have been an easy no until you had Anthony Richardson coming in and taking back over as the starting quarterback here. Now, obviously, it's hard to be that excited about Josh Downs. To be honest with you, I don't know. I think this is a personal preference type deal. If you really needed a wide receiver, sure, go ahead. Take DeAndre Hopkins. But if you're going to make this deal and Hopkins would be a borderline flex play for you where it's not like you're starting Hopkins every single week, then you just keep the best player with Kyron Williams. Where Kyron Williams is very easily the best player in this deal. And you're going to get the extra game out of Kyron too in comparison to Brees, where Brees still has the week 14 bye. Now, Rich Pedro coming out again says 6-4 Flowers is killing me. Like my odds without him. Well, who do we have else at receiver? Pickens is a must start. I mean, if you weren't going to go Flowers, you'd go Tillman. I'd rather have Flowers over Tillman. It would be a much better offense. And then, never mind, you have to go Flowers and Tillman here, wide receiver and flex. So Flowers has been very much up and down all season, but what's the alternative? And you go, Flowers is too inconsistent, so let's play Jameson Williams. Like, obviously, we can't be making that pivot. So it does suck, the inconsistency that we have seen with Flowers so far this year. But I do think it's a spot where you probably still end up having to take him. Now, Kyler coming out with the next question. This is a 2 receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex. We're wide receiver. We have Jefferson, Zay, DJ, Dobbs. Running backs, we have Barkley, Walker, Charbonnet, Warren, Brooks. Tight end, we have Kincaid. We actually just looked at a trade that's very similar to this. So essentially you're telling me, listen up, buddy. I need a wide receiver. DJ Moore's turned into a bum. I'm going to downgrade at running back from Kenneth Walker to Chase Brown, and I'm going to get Jaden Reed, who I can play at my second wide receiver slot. That's what the deal is. If Chase Brown holds on to this same exact role that he's had over the past 2 weeks through the rest of the season, and they don't begin to mix in Khalil Herbert, they don't begin to mix in any other running backs here in Cincinnati, then it's very easily the Chase Brown side. Because then at that point, Chase Brown, Kenneth Walker are pretty much the same dude. And you get Jaden Reed, who obviously this team could use. The only hesitation I have here is, what if Khalil Herbert does come in and see 30% of the opportunities in this backfield? And then at that point, you have to lower expectations where Walker is in a different tier than Chase Brown. That would be my only hesitation. But with how bad you need a receiver, I completely understand making this deal. Now, Jake says, Jacob's rest of season schedule is scary. Would this help my team? No. I don't even need to pull up your team, and I'm telling you, you're not getting nearly enough value. I mean, we can pull up the rest of the team. Running back, we had our Brees and Chase Brown left over. Wide receiver, we have Jefferson and Smith. What would help your team is cut a tight end and go pick up another receiver off the waiver wire. But yeah, you don't trade Montgomery and Jacobs here for Drake London and Warren. If you told me that Najee Harris was going to miss the rest of the season, and then all of a sudden Jalen Warren had a substantial amount of value, then sure, yeah, you can make this deal. But not with the expectation that Najee maybe misses a week at the most. Now, it's J-Rock says, good deal for me, or should we try countering? Mixon's by far and away the best player in this. So we're downgrading from Mixon to Chase Brown to upgrade from Hubbard to Josh Jacobs. I would try countering. Trust me, I don't mind selling Chuba Hubbard, to be honest with you. But my issue with this is more so along selling Joe Mixon. I mean, if you could sell a tight, does this team need a tight end? No, they have freaking Kelsey. Never mind. We're rostering 3 tight ends here. Who do they have quarterback? I'm trying to think of a counter for you. Do we need a wide receiver? We have St. Brown, Smith, Waddle. So we could use another wide receiver. I mean, if you get them to throw in Hopkins, then at that point, sure, go ahead and make the deal. But just Joe Mixon and Chuba straight up for Jacobs and Chase Brown, I think you take the best player in Joe Mixon. Like, I'm not the biggest Chuba guy. I do think Jonathan Brooks comes back in after the bye and has some type of usage. Even if Chuba's still the starting back, I think it does eat into him just a bit. Obviously, everybody disagrees with me on that, which I completely understand why. And for that reason, I definitely think you need to get more value if you were to go through and sell Chuba. But Milo coming out with our next question says, 12-team PPR, no good running backs. Down tier, or should we stand put? When you say no good running backs, we have Ramadre. Yeah, we have no good running backs. I think it's a very reasonable price tag, especially with Najee Harris injured and the fact that your running back room's garbage. If you wanted a down tier from Jefferson to Puka and pick up Jahmyr Gibbs here, I definitely would be willing to do so. If you wanted to try to squeeze out a little more value from them, maybe instead of sending Najee, you could try to send Bucky. But regardless, I think it's a fine price point to go out and get Gibbs, even if we are giving up the best player here, of course. Now, our next question coming out from Bubba here. Be completely honest with you, my guy. I'm going to save the team reviews here to open up the live stream tomorrow. I see we have 2 free Underdog team reviews. I'm going to do those as soon as the live stream opens up tomorrow. Let me get through the rest of the start sit trade questions. Just because we're going to be streaming early tomorrow, and I don't think we'll have that many questions in the live stream. So if I answer it tomorrow midday, I think I'll be able to spend more time on it, to be honest with you. But Michael coming out with this question says, Waddle, Kelsey versus Brian Robinson and Reed. Kelsey is the best player in this deal. You're upgrading from Waddle to Reed to downgrade from Kelsey to Brian Robinson. Do we have another viable tight ends? No. How bad do we need a running back? Our running backs are Mixon, and then RB2 is Zach Charbonnet. Okay, if your RB2 is Zach Charbonnet, then sure, go make this deal. But I would rather stream. There have been more tight end streamers this year by a decent margin than running back streamers. So, yeah, I mean, you can definitely make this deal if you wanted to. Now, Karop's coming out with their next question here. This is Swift, Lamb versus Gibbs. Give me Gibbs. Obviously, this wouldn't be anywhere close to the Jahmyr Gibbs side if it was not for the Dak Prescott injury. But with the Dak injury, if we view Swift as an RB2 rest of season, Lamb as a wide receiver 2 rest of season, I would rather just have the locked and loaded RB1 in Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, next question coming out from B. Granat says, start Jameis or Drake May? Drake May. I just traded Brian Thomas and Downs for a Monra. Let me know your thoughts. Insane deal. Insane based off the quarterbacks that you currently have in Jacksonville and Indy. And then I'm assuming we need to start 2 receivers in a flex. The wide receivers you'd start would be St. Brown, DK Metcalf, Drake London at wide receiver in flex. But great trade for Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially when we have the wide receiver depth. Now, Ivan coming out with a start set. Happy to see you again, my guy. Here, we're choosing between 2 receivers. London does have a very tough matchup. I think plan A is London and Adams. You actually do have good projections for Adams and this Jets offense this week. Sportsbooks are telling us that the Jets should have a little bit of a bounce back this week, at least offensively. Looking at what you have with specifically London, it's a really tough matchup going up against Surtain. If you're looking at Adams here, if he does miss, because obviously he missed practice today with the wrist/illness, if he decides to sit and get 100% healthy going into the bye, then I think you pivot over to Jaden Reed there at wide receiver. Now, already coming out with a trade question. This is Brian Robinson versus T. Higgins. I have them at 53 and 52 in my rest of season rankings. I have them back to back effectively. Wide receiver now, we have Jefferson, Ladd. We lost Olave. You lost Olave. If you wanted to go get Higgins, I'm not going to fault you for it. To be honest, I would probably rather wait. I would not accept this deal tonight. Like, I'm assuming the other owner would be willing to let this deal sit out there until maybe eat your feet. Please let me know again what your question was, and I'll be happy to look at it for you. But looking at Higgins versus Robinson, if you can wait to get the confirmation that Higgins is going to be good to go with the practice report tomorrow, that'd be massive. As I will say, if Higgins doesn't play this week, he's on the franchise tag. The Bengals lose and are completely out of it. At that point, does he even come back? Most likely, but still, it is a small concern. Okay. Yoing says, can we, the people, get a recap of our new profile pick birds? Also, when can we buy/win accessories like little hats for our profile picks? We have a lot of stuff coming with this. This is version 1 of the profile picks. We'll go and show this real quick. So version 1 of the profile picks is just allowing people to choose their bird, allows people to choose the background color. We already have a bunch of different accessories and stuff. And what we're thinking of doing is like kind of making it a, like putting unlockable accessories where you can essentially really like customize it to a point where like we can maybe have an unlockable accessory where, oh, link your fantasy football team with the site. And then you get a little crown or something, right, to put on a bird. Or use the trade calculator every day for a week. Then you get maybe a little bow tie for a bird and stuff like that. So that's what we're planning on doing it right now. But if y'all have any specific accessories that you would want for the birds, please let me know. We already have a decent amount made. It's just we are focusing on making more tools for y'all with the site. So the accessories with the birds, to be honest with you, probably aren't going to be done until the off season, as we're trying to get out some tools for y'all on the site right now. And obviously there are already a bunch of tools, but additional tools. And yes, there are helmets made for the birds as well. I do like the idea, but please, it's much easier said than done, at least for me, coming up with, we have, I think already, I sent the designer, I want to say like 5 different accessories, maybe 6 different accessories. And it's much easier said than done coming up with accessories. So if y'all have anything you want to see with the bird, please let me know. Carlos says, how do I send a team review? So if you wanted the free team review and you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog, just set up an account with the same email address on flockfantasy.com. And then the following day, Underdog is going to send me a list of all the email addresses that signed up to the site with code FLOCK. And then the developers are going to set up accounts with the same email address with a free team review voucher. And then when you go to the team review page, it should say free. If you were looking to get a free team review, if that's what you're asking. But I hope I help, my friend. Okay. Now, D-Money coming out. This is Aaron Jones, Mike Evans versus Nico Collins. For sure, we are going to go ahead. We are going to take Nico Collins. This is a dynasty trade. I mean, honestly, if it was a redraft deal, I'd still be doing it anyway. But I mean, a redraft dynasty, tomato, doesn't matter. Nico Collins is by far and away the best player in this deal. And if you were looking at this through the lens where you have to think long-term, Aaron Jones and Evans are going to be worth significantly less this offseason than Nico. Yeet Your Feed says, the trade was me trading Ingram or Kraft for Pittman in a dynasty league. So I wouldn't trade Kraft for Pittman. I would trade Ingram if you really needed to make that pivot. But I would definitely much prefer Tucker Kraft over Evan Ingram in a dynasty format. Now, Yang coming out says, second quarterback position is a super flex, stuck between my flexes. Well, we're still going to start 2 no matter what. Great matchup. And then going down to the flex, you go with DK Metcalf. The Metcalf, tough spot going up against the Niners, but we have seen in the past that when the Seahawks fall behind, they're willing to just completely abandon the run and have Geno drop back 40, 50 times in a game. So I think that is a very real possibility of what you could have here in Seattle this week. Now, Hoodie Maw coming out with our next question. It's a start sit where running back, we have the 2 guys that are locked and loaded with CMC. Brees, auto starts every week. Wide receiver, Ladd and Smith with Evans on bye. Tight end, we go with Taysom. And then we're going to be going Chase Brown at running back. Great starting lineup and very easy to submit as well. Very easy. I don't think Allen at tight end is worth a roster spot, to be honest. I'd cut him. Swamp Donkey says, just made this trade. What are you thinking? We sold Lamb to Nico, upgrade. Amari to Reed, upgrade. Pitts to Hawkinson, upgrade. We essentially just paid J.K. Dobbins to get it done. With Nico coming back in this week and the Dak Prescott injury impacting Lamb for the long term, this is a no-brainer. We want the Nico Collins side, 100%. Great deal. Now, Trey coming out with our next question. This is A.J. Brown versus Dobbins, Jameson, Dell. It's a 12-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. It's not even really close. It's A.J. Brown. Neither Jameson Williams or Tank Dell are really startable. As you get Nico Collins back in, I don't know really how we could be looking at Dobbins with excitement. Jameson seeing 2 to 3 targets a game. So for the love of God, stick with the best player and please stick with A.J. Brown here. I think A.J. Brown's the easy side. Okay. But I think that should be it for this live stream. I'll be live early tomorrow. I know that there are 2 team reviews that we are going to get to that are free team reviews from Underdog. I will get to these. They'll be the first ones we do in the live stream tomorrow. We're going to be doing that live stream earlier. And obviously, even if you can't make it in the live stream, the second that we do it, you're going to get sent the link with the exact time that I answered your question through the site. So it should be very easy for you to find, even if you're not able to make it to the live stream. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope that you have a great day. And I really hope we get to see you out with the live stream for the game tomorrow.